Hello, all you amazing mystical miracles uniquely created in the divine image and endowed with self-evident rights. Since rights are so de rigueur today, even as the left claims the folks who they deem to be victims are robbed of their rights by the Western patriarchal colonial tyranny, and as the alt-right screams about their loss of rights to the illiberal authoritarian left, who are obviously attempting to re-engineer society in their neo-Marxist image, let's dive right into this game of whack-a-mole and examine what on earth this Hegelian dialectic is all about. I am here at your disposal to help unravel the impenetrable mysteries of our time by dumbing them down for the common man, woman, or whatever your sexual proclivity may be, since I do not have sufficient time to list the ever-expanding possible list of sexes, their fluidity, non-fluidity, and the non-binary agendas to which you may subscribe. So welcome to the Philosophy for Philistines channel, where today I will discuss the prerequisite component of all rights. Wait for it, namely personal accountability. Freedom, however you may define it, is not license. Yet this is not what so many people think it is today. So let's demonstrate some real courage here. It seems that we live in a night when there is a crisis of trust in our culture, where we are very uncertain of our institutions and the people who make them up and what their motivations might be. Indeed, the research backs this up. The Australian National University has been tracking Australians' confidence in their politicians and the political process now for many decades, finding that Australia is now in uncharted waters with record numbers of Australians who no longer have confidence in their system. Australians now distrust the political process and the players in it. Recently, Australia's latest series of royal commissions of inquiry into banking and the financial institutions revealed that Aussies couldn't trust their bankers either. When people are in a relationship of trust, harmony and progress can be made. But when trust breaks down, harmony and progress are impaired. And people will flee for safety. If people don't feel safe, they'll look for the rule book, for policing, and for protection. Since our cousins in Australia have marched so readily toward authoritarian control and lockdowns, I chose to use that nation as an example with this caveat. Canada is close on their heels. This brings us back to the individual, where any real lasting change must occur. We are all accountable to help steer the ship of state. The questions are, do you want a state with more regulatory power? Do you want a state with more surveillance? First of all, why would you think that would be trustworthy when all the evidence suggests in the past that as a state expands, its surveillance power actually becomes less trustworthy rather than more? Who would want that? I don't believe it will work. I do not think surveillance states make people more honest. Rather, I think all the evidence points to the opposite. I would say from the perspective of the individual, we got things fundamentally right in the West. Because there are a number of things we got fundamentally right, even though we don't like to admit it anymore. This fundamental moral accountability for the state rests on us. That's what we got right. It relies on our moral integrity, mine and yours. First of all, we have the right and the responsibility to vote, and therefore we could say, well, that's not exactly given to us by the state. It's something that exists in some sense outside and before the state. It's part and parcel of our intrinsic value, which was a decision that we made in the West, that each person, regardless of our flaws, is characterized by an intrinsic value so deep and so profound that the very regulation of the state itself rests on our shoulders. That's really something. That's why we have the right to vote, and that's worth thinking about. Then the first question is, well, do you think this is a good idea or not? I believe that we are in fact sovereign individuals, and let's assume that you believe this too, because the alternative is some form of autocracy. It would mean a tyranny where the parsing of our sovereignty, with the parsing of our sovereignty to a bureaucracy or some other form of arbitrary leadership. Yet perhaps you do believe in such arbitrary leadership, and that you would like a strong leader. Fine, but you want to think that through, because if it's not that, then it's you and I who have to ensure that the ship of state is sailing properly. Then the first thing you might want to ask is, what makes you think you're any more trustworthy than the people that you're despising or criticizing? If the ship of state is listing and sinking, that's our problem. It's our fault because we are not doing something right. Because we are not educated enough, not awake enough, not articulate enough. We do not know enough about history, nor are we taking on enough responsibility. So we're looking for other people to blame because it's convenient. It's the dispersal of responsibility. And after all, who wants all that responsibility? Either way, there's a price to pay. A price our ancestors willingly paid to create our priceless inheritance of limited, constitutional, responsible government and free market individual economic liberty. And it is up to each of us to restore that, to resurrect that system which is now bleeding and dying under the knives of our own lack of attention, inadequacy, hypocrisy, moral failings, and criticism. No matter how many times I've stated, it bears repeating every day. There cannot be a political solution to a moral, philosophical, and spiritual crisis, because politics exists far downstream of the latter. Of the former, rather. No, of the latter. The West is in a crisis due to its own wickedness and corruption. Each of us bear the accountability for this, me foremost. 2 days ago, I made a podcast about the alleged arrest of Klaus Schwab, as reported in the Conservative Beaver, stating that I felt it was unlikely to have been true. This was my most watched podcast ever, with more comments than I have ever received on this channel. Sadly, those comments were a clear indicator that those who left remarks had not actually watched my podcast. Now, all of you walking, talking, unique divine miracles is in order to set things right, we must all of us, start paying attention. Or why should we think we have solutions to problems we have not even bothered, when we have not even bothered to understand the question? There's a real issue here. So few of us are thinking things through, which is why I remain here at your disposal, hoping you will watch my podcast through to the end, because I am trying to dive into problems that you're quite likely not going to dive into yourself, and therefore will only assign them low resolution solutions, which aren't solutions at all, to multivariate complex problems you just don't wish to understand. Or maybe you just don't want to carry the burden of doing something about it. Have a great day. God bless you all.